Cool. All right. Well, welcome to the third annual Pikes Peak Birding and Nature Festival. My name is Todd Martz, and I am the Division Manager for Recreation and Cultural Services. So I've been at Bear Creek Nature Center for a little over 20 years now, and I started my career there and started doing birding the second week I was there, and I learned a lot. And over 20 years, I have just been impressed with how much you can learn from watching birds and just going on hikes and looking for birds. So sometimes they're not as productive when you're out hiking, but you always get something out of it. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Springtime in the Rockies, maybe a little bit unpredictable weather, but I think we can always guarantee that it's going to be a beautiful place to go hike. And so we had people all over the county today and more tomorrow. The great diversity that we have in El Paso County, I think, is what really makes this birding festival unique. And plus, the great birders that take us out on these hikes. So I'd like everybody to give a hand to the hike leaders. Yep. We've got a mission for our birding festival. It's to provide an ecotourism, birding, and nature festival that promotes conservation and education that builds upon the area's natural and agricultural heritage resources of the Pikes Peak region. That's really what we try to focus on, and that's a pretty broad topic, but it really helps us to kind of keep a grasp on what we're trying to accomplish. And the nature part is a smaller, but it definitely is a part of the festival. We had a great executive committee, and I'd like to read off their names real quick, and then you can give them a round of applause. Risa Fosterbruder, Nancy Bernard, Mel Goff, Rebecca McNamee, Kathy Railton, Brett Tennis at Garden of the Gods, Pat Grove, Becca Fruit, how do you say that? She's not here, so we're good. Kristen Johnson and Melissa Lima. Please give them a big hand. Risa Fosterbruder really has been Risa and I are the co-chairs, and my co is a very small CO. She really has done the bulk of this and really organized all the field trips and works with all the different diversity of hike leaders. So a special round of applause for Risa Fosterbruder. We have a great opportunity here. The festival, the fee is $25 to come to all of the field trips except for a few things. And I can tell you that $25 does not cover the expenses. We are very blessed and lucky to have quite a few sponsors, and they've stepped up for the last 3 years, and that's how we can offer this for such an affordable price. I'll read them and you can give them a round of applause. Aiken Audubon Society, the Friends of El Paso County Nature Centers, J&R Group, the Friends of Cheyenne Canyon, Chico Basin, and Pikes Peak Community Foundation are our sponsors and made this possible. Some of the partners I'll list right now, but there were a lot of them that did different things throughout the day and tomorrow. Colorado Springs Park and Rec, North Cheyenne Canyon, Garden of the Gods, Pikes Peak Community College was wonderful. They helped us with the art this year. Venatucci Farm, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo gave us a wonderful, very affordable opportunity to do a behind-the-scenes tour. Colorado Springs Utilities, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Phantom Canyon Brewing, if you were there last night, we had beer. Bear Creek and Fountain Creek Nature Centers, and last but not least, that's El Paso County. They're letting us use this room, all the staff that's here helping us out, and if you didn't know, if you parked in the garage tonight, when you leave tonight, just tell them you were at the birding festival and you can park here free tonight. So big round of applause for all of our partners. Our keynote speaker tonight is Bill Schmoker, and I've got a chance to meet him a little bit, but I give him credit. He teaches middle school in Boulder for the last 24 years, so if you guys give him any grief, I think he can handle it. He's got a great resume and just a real diverse things that he's done. He's been an instructor for the American Birding Association, National Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, Boulder County Nature Association, and now the Pikes Peak Birding and Nature Festival. I hope he adds that to it.
Definitely.
His leadership role in the birding community include terms as the Colorado Field Ornithologist President, Colorado Bird Records Committee member, and Regional eBird Reviewer. Hopefully you're all connected to eBird. Bill has embarked on 2 Arctic Ocean research expeditions as a PolarTREC teacher and explored Greenland as a National Geographic Teacher Fellow. A widely published bird, wildlife photographer, author, and public speaker, Bill finds adventure and seeks new knowledge wherever he finds himself. And I think he found some today he was telling me about. Whether gardening in his own backyard or on an icebreaker at the North Pole and everything in between. So please join me in welcoming Bill.
Thank you. How is my voice carrying to you? Am I okay? Usually I'm kind of projecting to my kids without this, so forgive me if I'm not used to the mic, but also I love it if you have anything to chime in with along the way. If I say something that doesn't make sense, you'll have to forgive me and just say, don't you mean that? But anywhere along the line, occasionally I might disappear behind the lectern there just to fast forward a video or something just in the interest of time. But yeah, I'd love to tell you about a trip I took 2 summers ago to the North Pole aboard that giant red boat. That's the US Coast Guard cutter Healy. It's actually the biggest ship in the Coast Guard fleet. It was the 3rd time that the Healy had gone to the geographic North Pole, and we'll get into that a little bit later. How did I get to do this? So it wasn't as a birder. It wasn't a birding trip. It wasn't there to see birds. So really a subtext, I think, will be seeing birding in nature, even if it isn't the main purpose. It may be a trip like this or visiting somewhere that you haven't been, but maybe you're visiting for a business trip or you're visiting family, but you have an hour or a day or an extra weekend to do some birding, do some citizen science, which I'll talk about. But the reason I got to go is a part of this international collaboration called GEO-TRACES. And countries around the world are surveying their oceans for trace elements and isotopes to see how water is circulating, to look for pollutants, to look for nutrients, to look for tracers and other proxies that tell us a lot of what's going on in the ocean. And that white thing under the yellow tower is a CTD sampling rosette. It's got 24 20-liter bottles on it. That's kind of like binoculars are to birders. For chemical oceanographers, they want to get water, and not just water from the surface, but from any level. So the simplest explanation of our trip was to go to lots of stops and get water from lots of levels to find lots of different trace elements in that water for different studies. I was able to go as a PolarTREC teacher. There's a picture I took of the CTD going down through this program that the National Science Foundation sponsors. They call it PolarTREC because it's at the poles, both ends of the world. And TREC is teachers and researchers exploring and collaborating. So science teachers can apply to be the teacher end of it. Researchers who want to host a teacher apply to get a teacher. And somehow I got lucky and the two connected. I went on a cruise in 2010 in the Arctic Ocean, and then in 2015 again, even farther north. There's some of the main entities involved. The cooperation of my school district, Boulder Valley Schools, was huge because I missed half a semester. I was gone 9 weeks. National Science Foundation supports that with the substitutes, with the travel costs, the training, things like that. So it's pretty neat. And the Coast Guard is very welcoming. I'm really impressed by them, too. I never served in any of the armed services, but boy, they do such a great job of getting the scientists where they need to be safely and accomplishing that mission. So PolarTREC teachers have a few roles. I'd say the main role is the outreach, and this is, I think, one of the main attractions for researchers, because they're also largely grant-driven, and often those grants are contingent upon a public outreach component, and for some reason they think teachers are good at that. I don't know, I tried. But every day I posted an online journal, so my students and anyone in the world could follow along, see what was happening, not live, but every day. I took thousands and thousands of photos, both to support my journals, but also to support the researchers having a photo library. I ended up producing 66 edited short videos. They're all on the PolarTREC YouTube channel. So that's kind of the outreach side of it. Part of it's for me and whatever teachers are in the program to just learn more. You become better science teachers if you do science. And you know, it's an isolating job. You get in your classroom and it's great, I love it, but to get out in the world and do authentic science, you kind of have to look for these opportunities, but I think it's very meaningful for the teacher and the students to see their teacher as a member of the scientific community. I also develop lesson plans that go onto the website to share with other teachers. And then I'm just also there as a helper. If they need someone to schlep bottles, if they need someone to take data, whatever they could teach me to do, I'd be happy to do it. So I was just another able-bodied person. But as I hinted at, this last part wasn't really under the official role. But as a hardcore bird watcher, I certainly wanted to do that in my off time whenever I could. This is just the top part of one of my daily journal pages, and it would scroll down to see what we're doing and have some pictures. The videos mostly happened once I got back because we didn't have bandwidth to send videos. This was a case where the Coast Guard was so supportive because they've got their military satellite, really narrow bandwidth, but I would work with the Coast Guard information specialist and give him, there are actually three of them, him and a couple of gals, the photos I needed to get out to the world and the text. And they'd find a time in the, like 2:30 a.m. or something when it was real quiet, and they'd send it off. And PolarTREC would format it and make it look nice, and I'd be able to do that every day. This is the science lounge on the 2 deck. There's 50 scientists on board, actually 49 plus a teacher. That was me. It was maxed out. A lot of people wanted to be on this cruise for that special opportunity to go up deep into the Arctic and look at the water there. So we'd have science seminars and meetings and again, just learn. I did a talk on bird migration that I thought went pretty well. They had to move it to the helicopter hangar because there were a lot of crew who came to see that as well. That was really neat. You'll see an example of this, but I'm doing a movie there using a 20-foot aluminum ice pole to put my GoPro down and see what was going on under the ice. So you'll see the result of that a little later. But yeah, the bird watching part was tricky because here's where we got up to, well, let's see what I've got here. I honestly don't remember. Oh yeah, this is just as a helper. So wherever we stopped, sometimes in the ice, sometimes on the way to the ice, this could be at 2 in the afternoon or 2 a.m. The time is so valuable that when you show up, you go. And in the ice, we had to, of course, make a space, push the ice away. That's the frame that holds these bottles, but they're measuring these minute amounts of different trace elements, so we try to keep it all really clean and covered. The bottles don't live there. They live inside of this van that you'll see in a minute. It's like a 20-foot shipping container, but it's like a self-contained lab with its own HEPA quality air filtration, kind of like a clean room. So it's not very glamorous, but we would just have to go out there and get it all untied and then bring the bottles out to the frame, lock them on, get them ready to go, and then depending on how deep we went, maybe an hour later, maybe 4 hours later, maybe 5 hours later, then we had to bring the bottles back in. So it's something that it's important, but it doesn't take a PhD to figure out how to do it. Just some gumption and showing up on time. So that's what this is all about, is just getting ready for a cast. I'm going to fast forward just slightly. You can see a little prop wash. They run the propeller slowly to try to keep the ice going back away from the stern, and up it goes. That yellow thing is called an A-frame. It's not really like an A, but it's a crane that can lift stuff off the deck, take it overboard, and then hours later it comes back. Whenever we're working on the deck, you hear that humming because it's all hydraulic, and there's hydraulic pumps if you wonder what that background noise is. So all the tops are closed. All these bottles now have 20 liters of water that they could trigger wherever they want, as deep as the ocean is. They've got like 10,000 meters of cable. And where we went, the deepest water was just under 5,000 meters, so around just under 3 miles deep. On the way down, you get a profile showing temperature, salinity, oxygen levels, and you can kind of pick. And then on the way back up, let's get a bottle here, get a bottle here, get a bottle here. But it's not as fun because the bottles are heavier and they're wet and they're cold. But yeah, that was just the helping aspect. And birding. So I couldn't get onto the web, but I kept notes, and when I got home, I e-birded every day at least one checklist. A lot of those checklists have 0 birds in them, but it still had an effort and its data. Some of them maybe had 1 species. This is a week-long summary where I saw 2 species that week, from August 18th to August 24th. Again, some days none, some days 1, but this is totally blank. There's no eBird list from much of our cruise tracks, so it's just a way that anyone who knows just enough about birds to identify them can really contribute meaningful data to citizen science. And it doesn't have to be the Arctic. Any of you today, if you have your eBird checklist, it's go into that growing database to really help see where birds are, when they are, how abundant they are, and things like that. Whew. So does that make sense why I was there? The Healy is stationed in Seattle, and all the big stuff comes on and off there, but our cruise departed from Dutch Harbor. And Dutch Harbor's up on Unalaska Island, about a third of the way out the Aleutians. It's the closest deepwater port to the entire US Arctic. And this is actually a problem that may be coming sooner than we think as the Arctic Ocean opens more and more, and there's more shipping. If you've got a ship that needs a deepwater port, it's about 3.5 day sail all the way down to the Aleutians and then turn around and go back. So the Healy did a cruise before ours, and for about 5 days we had to roust all of our gear up out of the holds where it had been put in Seattle 2 months earlier, set it up, rig it up, and kind of get ready for our cruise. So that was another thing. What didn't involve a whole lot of birding, but just finding stuff, getting organized, and getting ready to go. Luckily, there's a freight elevator in the ship, but the hold there is about 20 feet below the water line, and then up it comes, and you just get ready. So I didn't have a lot of time to do birding in Dutch Harbor, even though you want to, because you're up in the Aleutian Islands. I'd always bird on my way to the hotel and back, so that was something. But a lot of it was just kind of getting ready to go. But once we were ready to go, this is another part where we were setting up one of the lab spaces and hanging a bubble of plastic to filter the air and make it as clean as possible. The Healy's mission is to support science. It doesn't do interdiction. It doesn't do patrols like other Coast Guard ships that do. You write a proposal to get time on it, and it's got this huge main lab that's set up, and then you customize it for whatever trip you're doing. So one of our jobs to customize it was to build essentially a clean space for all this sensitive analysis to happen. So I shot some time lapse, and this is one of the fun ones of hanging the bubble. And then it puffs up. It's positive pressure. It's pretty neat. Once you turn on the air filters, it goes, and it's a lot cleaner than my room, I can tell you that. But finally, everything was set up, and we're ready to go, and it had a day. So I kind of took off after lunch and climbed the hill right behind the port. That's a bald eagle flying towards the Healy. It actually was a fort in World War II. They were very concerned about the strategic positioning of the Aleutians. Japan bombed this fort right before the Battle of Midway. But the only reason I'm telling you that is there's a road up it from that fort and still the old gun emplacements and so on. But it's a great way to get up on the tundra there. This is the Arctic ground squirrel. It's the only native land animal there. The shorebirds are really great. A lot of rock sandpipers, which is kind of a tough bird to see in a lot of the U.S., but very common there. So I started filming a little bit of what we saw around up on this mountain. It's called Mount Ballyhoo above the harbor. You can see where we are there. And it's a neat place. This is just right along the shorefront as you walk from the hotel towards the dock. A lot of summering humpback whales out in the harbor. It's hard to get tired of seeing those. There's actually, it's mostly a work-oriented town. It's more tonnage of seafood gets shipped from Dutch Harbor than any other U.S. port. If you've seen like the crab show, The Deadliest Catch, they do a lot of stuff there and so on. But it's mostly just company housing and fish processing. But there's one public house, we'll say. It's a bar and grill, but it's called the Norwegian Rat, and it's right, you can see this sitting on their deck. It's just pretty ridiculous to have that kind of ambiance. Things like whales reaching out in the harbor. This is kind of bird only. But one of the neat birds we get to see here are our rosy finches. Nesting brown caps, and in the winter, of course, we can see gray-crowned and black. The Aleutian Island has an endemic subspecies of rosy finch. It looks like the coastal birds we sometimes see in Colorado, the Hepburns with the complete gray hood, but they don't leave. As harsh as it is there, it also doesn't freeze because of the maritime influence. Right down at sea level, it's virtually snow-free all winter. If it does snow, it melts. So these guys never leave, and they're about the size of robins. They're big, bulky, rosy finches. But you'll hear car noises. I'm just on a sidewalk next to the road, and here's a rosy finch foraging right on the cliff. And it was going into a crack, and you could hear nestlings begging when it went in. That was kind of spiffy to see. And then one more bird-oriented movie here. Just kind of the go-to sandpiper, these rock sandpipers. They're fun. They love the rocky shore, forage, retreat at high tide up to these rocky roosts. And it's just a heck of a thing to see lots of rock sandpipers as the default. Try to find something else like a western sandpiper or a ruddy turnstone, something that we think of as more common, is actually much rarer to find up there. So snuck that in a little bit. Once I got up to the top of Mount Ballyhoo, I did one more time lapse just to show you the scenery. Lucked out, it was a pretty nice day. It rains a lot, it's cloudy a lot, but this is impressive. So I don't know if it's still true, but I read in one of their brochures that this was the highest above sea level gun emplacement they had. It's almost 1,000 feet up. But from here, they could really sweep the entrances and protect it in case there was an invasion. So it's a neat place, and there's regular flights. If you want, like, Aleutian's easy, go to Dutch Harbor. There's a fairly active volcano there coming into view. It's erupted in historic times. Of course, that's what the Aleutian Island chain is all built on. So it's neat geologically. It's neat from a wildlife point of view. The history, it's pretty spectacular. It's actually old lichen-covered concrete there. It looks like a rock in one of these bunkers they built way up there. But couldn't last. Next morning, off we went. I won't bore you by reading these, but there's a neat variety of birds there. Some cool seabirds, some murrelets. Birds that we think of as Colorado, pretty common, like song sparrow, but as you'd expect, they look really different. It's a different subspecies. Some gulls. Yeah, you can definitely keep yourself busy with your binoculars there. But off we went. We started out with a leg along the continental shelf break, so all the light colors, very shallow water. The blue is pretty deep. And we were following this break to see how the water circulates there, and we kind of went right to there and then suddenly turned because that becomes Russian waters, and we weren't cleared to go into there. So we went basically as far west as we could without crossing that, and then started up towards the Bering Strait and the Arctic Ocean. But the Bering Sea is really rich, nutrient-rich, therefore fish-rich, therefore seabird-rich, etc. And we had some migrants already, like this ruddy turnstone. There was a group of 3 that was probably just migrating from the north slope to the Aleutians or even farther south. They landed for a little while and went on their way. We'd go by these little collections where there was probably a dead something in there, a fish or whatever, and these birds just going crazy on it. And some of you maybe have gone on a pelagic trip where you go out to see seabirds, they slow down and chum and stop, and no, we were just go, 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 go until we got to our spot. So it was exciting, but also agonizing to be going by this at 12 knots, and you're looking like, take a picture, look, take a picture, look, and then off you go. But there are black-legged kittiwakes here with the light back. There's a a red-legged kittiwake there and landing. You probably can't tell on the screen, but there's red legs showing. There's some short-tailed shearwaters. There's northern fulmars. I mean, it was birds all the time, if you cared to look. Here's the first of many albatross we saw. This is a Laysan albatross. Here's a couple of northern fulmars. There's very light ones and very dark ones, and quite a few that are in between. So there's great studies of those. Often on Deadliest Catch, when you see the birds swirling around in the lights, they're northern fulmars. So they're really tough birds. But then this happened. We stopped for a station, which can take 12, 18, even over 24 hours, depending on how much is being measured there. And albatrosses started to accumulate because they're smart, and they go behind fishing boats. So then they get the bycatch and the bait. So I think they saw this big ship, and they thought, oh, let's check it out. And these are all short-tailed albatross. Now, short-tailed albatross is a bird that was actually considered extinct in 1949. They only nest on a few islands in the Japanese islands. During World War II, there wasn't a lot of scientific exchange for obvious reasons, and they're hunted to none. When researchers finally got back to the nesting colonies, there were no nesting birds at all. But they take several years to mature, 6 to 8 years. So it turns out the last few young birds went out, spent 6, 7, 8 years just out in the Pacific, and then they went back. So by the early 50s, there were 22 nesting pairs, so 44 adults in the world. Now they're close, maybe 2,000-ish. So they're coming back, but slowly, and the 2,000 birds or 4,000 over the whole Pacific isn't very many. So I'm incredibly privileged to see 5 of them all visiting us. Here's an adult, nice and white with a big pink bill, and a sub-adult flying by. Just a stunning experience. Had little visitors like this guy. I'm up on the bridge, so it's about 70 feet above sea level. And something comes in and lands on the anchor chain, and I'm like, I can't see much. So in my birding workshop, I mentioned, or my photography workshop, that you can use photos to help identify. It doesn't always have to be a cover shot, right? So zoom in on that guy. It's got white wings, and its bill is kind of crossed. So that's a white-winged crossbill that landed on our anchor chains. And in eBird, there's where that bird is. So it kind of adds to the white-winged crossbill story, a little vagrant out there. I suspect they probably turn up in Siberia, but there's not a lot of eBirders there yet. And anyway, that's where we saw that one. Black-legged kittiwakes all the time. Pretty neat stuff. So again, a lot of birds. Not always seem great because you're in this big ship moving fast, but boy, it's rich. I think that's going to be the longest bird list of the whole talk, just because it is so productive. So off we went then to the north, heading for the Chukchi Sea, which is the sea that begins the Arctic Ocean proper. I like this shot because it was clear enough. It wasn't totally clear, but it's clear enough to see the U.S. here, that's Little Diomede Island, and then Russia there, which is Big Diomede Island. And they're separated by about 2.5-mile channel. We can actually see even a little farther, that's Cape, I think it's dry, you'll see it in a map. That's the Russian mainland there. And then looking the other way, you can see the U.S. So it's a very narrow channel. It's currently not too bottlenecked. There's not a lot of shipping, but again, as the Arctic opens up, it's going to be a trick because there'll be a lot more shipping there. It's foggy a lot. There's these islands right in the middle, and you just have a few miles on either side of room to deal with. But so I guess it's Cape Dejneva, and then on the Alaska side, Cape Prince of Wales. But once you're through that, you're up into the Chukchi Sea. There's still quite a few birds, but it's thinning out. It's starting to pick up some more northern birds, like a glaucous gull there. Pretty nice. Starting to change the mix of the murres from mostly common murres to mostly thick-billed murres. This is a couple thick-billed and a common, though, and a lot of times I couldn't tell. I just called it a murre species, but pretty fun to work through those. So by now, the crew knew, this guy's a birder, we're going to help him out. And I told him, hey, just if you see something weird, just page me. We always wear pagers, for safety or something's about to happen, you get a page like Schmoker, we need you on deck in 5 minutes or something. So I said, if you see a bird, page me, and I got a page. There's this weird bird running around in the fantail, and I went down there and couldn't find it. You know, there's just a lot of pipes and equipment and gear, and I thought I missed the opportunity. But a little later, I got it again, so I found it, and I couldn't identify it. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I had to get some pictures and dig around, but it's an eastern yellow wagtail, but it's a young bird. It's an immature bird, so that was fun to see. Then, as we got moving even farther north, we hit some pretty tough weather. As far as the wind goes, it was picking up. And so this frame was trying to go overboard, so those poor folks had to go out in the wind and secure it. But I'm in the aft con, so you could also be at the back of the ship, inside, but with great views and look. In this case, looking at some waves building. If it was totally open ocean and 30-knot winds, this would probably be 20, 25-foot seas, but it's 10 foot, which is still big seas, but there's just not a lot of fetch. You got Russia on one side, you got Alaska on the other, and then what's above it? Ice, yeah. So then the ice above is limiting how far those waves can go. But even 10-foot waves, when you head into them with a big ship, can be kind of spectacular. So you'll see that. See why you don't want to be out on deck right there. But it's really neat because up on the bridge, you got this sweeping view. You're high and dry and warm. And a lot of my kids ask, is it cold? Like, yeah, if you're out in spray. But inside is comfortable. They don't keep it like t-shirtish, but very comfortable in a sweatshirt and just jeans kind of thing. So we were looking up at the ice imagery. The red there is continuous ice. The yellow is the transition with some open water and some ice. And there we are heading towards it. We actually chose that the chief scientists and the captain, decided to go up the eastern leg and back down. Sorry. Go up the more western leg, which is in the eastern hemisphere. I know it's kind of confusing. But then back down in the western hemisphere, that's a flip because this was the heaviest, most continuous ice. We wanted to give it a few more weeks to thaw more. But the whole timing of the trip leaving in August was to aim for the North Pole on September 15th. Historically, that's when ice in the Arctic is at its minimum. Makes sense, the best time to try for it. So it's not great timing for school, but that's when they go. So we're looking at that, and we knew the ice was coming. And then once you get to ice, you don't have to be outside the tell because it starts banging the ship. And it just makes these crunches and bangs and noises. Or on most ships, we man the lifeboats, but it's an icebreaker. It's what it does. And bam, as soon as we saw ice, we encountered walruses. So this is a species that is undergoing a big shift because the ice is farther and farther north, which is in deeper and deeper water. And they are bottom feeders. They can't dive super deep. They go down and feel through the mud and stuff with those whiskers for clams. But in this case, they had swam far enough north to find some ice just to come out and relax and haul out and shed. You'll see a lot of brown because they're shedding their skin. But apparently in some places they've switched and now they go find beaches where they used to find ice to haul out and rest. But these are enormous. The only seals that are bigger are elephant seals. Some of these are mature males with meter-long tusks. It was definitely a highlight. But again, you see what happens on a research cruise. We keep going. They were nice. They slowed down. But off we went. It's probably all for the better if we stopped. The walruses may have decided to all jump in. And it's kind of a mix. The close ones jumped in. The far ones just stayed put. Every now and then you may hear a weird like sound. That's the sonar. It's clearly audible if you're in the right part of the ship. I like it. The left walrus here, that's a young one, very short tusks. We were talking about middle schoolers a few minutes ago with some people who were eating with me. So that's like a middle schooler. So how's it going to get into the water? Go! But this is a more mature female, and she's been around the block a time or two. She's like, here's how you do it. You go feet first, carefully. Feel your way down. No sense getting beat up about this. Take it easy. Yeah, that's because they've been there a long time. They shed their skin. Oh, yeah. The ice is pretty inherently blue, but as it's exposed to the air, it gets kind of bubbly and white. But yeah, the freshly melted underneath. And I think the water also just filters some of that light and makes it look bluish. Awesome. Keep shouting out. Questions anytime.
What was the temperature?
Air temperature is probably in the mid-30s. Often windy, often misty, rainy, foggy. So it wasn't bitterly cold like it would be in the winter, like negative 20 or anything. But definitely out on deck, you wear a Mustang. Well, you wear layers and then a Mustang suit. That's warm, mostly waterproof, and it floats. So if you go overboard, it makes it much easier to find your body. They early on did a drill, and just like a fire, unannounced, I was just on deck anyway looking for birds, and I saw I forget, one of the officers like dragging this dummy. He's like, shh, you know. And it's in a Mustang suit, and it's a life-size mannequin, and overboard. Calls up, man overboard drill, man overboard drill. So they want to see how fast they can get around and come back, put a boat overboard that races out to get it. And I think it was a little under 5 minutes. But that water with ice in it obviously is pretty cold. And Mustang suits float you, but they don't keep you dry. It's not an immersion suit. And of course, hopefully you are still alive, or at least hopefully they can still revive you. But yeah, that was kind of the deal, was if you're out on deck, you got to wear the Mustang. But you wanted to, because it was pretty raw. Birds are thinning. There's still some really neat birds, but much fewer. And that was about to change even more, because now we're heading north into that ice pack that's pretty continuous ice. A lot of terrible pictures, right? So if you were at my photo workshop, I chose nice pictures because they look good. But I take these too, and it's still informative. This is a immature black-legged kittiwake. And I probably should have appreciated it even more, because this was on the 22nd of August. I didn't see another bird until September 9th. So I went over a week with, almost 2 weeks with no birds. I was looking, not all the time, of course, but I had my buddies looking. Here's a bird that they saw that by the time I made it out, it was already gone. So I entered it as a bird species because I didn't know. I couldn't tell what it was. There was no photo. Who knows? But it got even more agonizing, because up here, a crew member saw this black-legged kittiwake. And I know the numbers up there are small, but that's at about 86.3 degrees north. And when I went before, the farthest north bird I saw was at 81.5. So I was dying, because this would have been my personal best. Couldn't find it, but he showed me kittiwake. You got to see it, and I didn't. So it goes. But here's where the other kittiwakes were seen. That was the one I saw on the previous cruise. So we're starting to really push it as far as northerly birds go. Hey, you've all been out there, even if the birding's slow. There's always stuff to see. Just the scenery itself, the ice, the phenomena of this ice fog and fog bows. It's wonderful. It's amazing. But, ooh, what do you think that is? Yeah, those are bear tracks. So, and we would see those from time to time. So you knew there's got to be bears around. And sure enough, eventually we got to see, not a lot, but we saw some bears. This one was amazing. So part of the mission here was not to see bears. If there was a distant bear, we didn't approach it. We actually had a guideline not to get closer than a kilometer. So if a bear was in our track, we'd actually divert to keep a healthy distance. But when you're stopped, if the bear wants to come over, that's the bear's prerogative. And this bear did. It was really curious to see what we were doing. I mean, I guess it's true. I wouldn't have believed it. Now, this is what happens when you're on a ship for 9 weeks. You have, like, Photoshop battles. This is one of my entries. It's not that good, but it's kind of funny. Yeah, I'll let Risa get a shot of that. But it probably has never seen a ship. It's never seen land. Some polar bears do, but this is so far out there that it lives its whole life in the ice. It dens in pressure ridges. And this is a pregnant female. The female's neck is a little different proportions. I learned that you can't put radio collars on the males, because they can just push them off their head, because they have this more conical neck. And she's just really gravid, maybe even with twins. So this, again, is late August. By winter, she's going to be denned up and giving birth, and they will develop, and then the next spring out they'll head into the world. But the non-pregnant and the males, I guess they're non-pregnant, they don't hibernate. They sometimes call it a walking hibernation, where they're almost a drone-like state, just walking and smelling, trying to find a seal or a dead whale to eat. But she'll by now hopefully have denned up and had her young, and the young will stay with the mom often over a year. You'll sometimes see like 3, and 2 of them are almost as big as the mom. She was a heck of a specimen, I tell you, probably close to 1,000 pounds. Yeah, so this is sea ice. There's no big icebergs like there are from Greenland or whatever, but you'll see later you get pressure ridges where the ice pushes together and buckles up, sometimes 20 feet tall, which means it's even deeper underwater. So there's some real estate to work with if you look at those pressure ridges. That's a recently frozen opening, and you can see, like, all right, pretty clever, but when she wants to, she can just go right in and swim too, which we'll see in a minute here. But this was obviously another wildlife highlight, was just spending time watching this bear so at home in this environment. Ice, water, doesn't matter. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Right. Right. Yep. Currently, yes, and in the past, yeah, there's populations that will den like on an island where they can get a snowbank. But these bears, yeah, are too far. So if the ice continues to retreat, there'll always be Arctic, I shouldn't even say always, but it'll freeze in the winter in the real foreseeable future, but it's the summer. The ice is less, so it melts faster and it's thinner and it retreats north, and it's harder to hunt too because they mostly eat seals. And seals in open water can't be caught. They rely on seals coming up to air holes or seals hauling out onto the ice to rest. So if it's just open water, the bear can swim 100 miles, but probably can't catch seals anymore there. So it's going to likely change where they're distributed. And yeah, so she came probably about 150 feet or so off the stern. This, if you're in my workshop, is a bridge camera. It's not a gigantic telephoto. It's just like an all-in-one mega zoom. And then she finally got bored with us, and off she went. I love that, just making more tracks out into the snow. And then after you've been swimming, you got to dry off, right? So that's how a bear dries off. It blots itself out in the snow. I'm not a polar bear expert, but I know their smell is notoriously amazing. So I suspect once they're within smell of each other, they can, if they're interested, they'll get closer. Often, if they're not interested, they get farther. Like adult male polar bears are known to eat young polar bears and maybe even skinny females. So you probably mostly just keep away. But yeah, that's a good question. What's that? Yes, that's right. That's right. They connect up. Here's a fog bow. It's not coming through very well with the light up there, but it's just some neat phenomenon. Even though we're not seeing birds, we're seeing stuff. So it's still pretty fun. So ice breaking, the ship doesn't actually cut the ice. It breaks it. It's brute force. It's got way more engine power than other ships of equivalent size. Of course, the hull strength. It's also the shape, so if it's thin enough, it can just smash through. If it's thicker, the hull slides up onto the ice, and then the weight of the ship just breaks it. Slides up on, breaks it. If it is too thick and you stop, you back up, and then you use your clear track to get more speed and just hit it harder. So it really is just a brute force thing, but it's amazing crunching and swirling sounds, and especially if you go down to the water line or below, like to do your laundry, it's just, and it shakes. It's a little, I've never really been in a strong earthquake, but for days at a time, it's shaking. too until you stop and do a sampling operation. But here's a pressure ridge that we're breaking through where the ice is thicker. Not a gigantic one, but the ice can pull apart or smash together. That's probably 5-6 feet that curled up there. The other thing to get used to that you could probably guess is the sun. It's constantly up, but never up high. It kind of does these laps, sometimes higher and lower, but 24-hour daylight. I just force myself, all right, it's 10 o'clock, I gotta go read a little and go to bed, and then wake up. But if you don't, you can do these weird, long awake cycles, and then you sleep a long time, and kind of get all out of whack. Here's a nice piece coming upwards. And I've had, I think, a very legitimate question, like, isn't that also harming the ice? It's certainly not helping the ice, we're breaking it, but the scale of things, I'll show you a map of a ship that leaves an 80-foot wide broken patch compared to the scale. And it closes up, it's dynamic. It will close up behind the ship and refreeze. But yeah, you're in a big diesel burning ship up in the Arctic, there's no doubt about it. But you need to study it too, I think, to understand what's happening. So it's a trade-off, yeah. Well, that's another great question. I don't know the number. It was how many other ships are doing this at the same time. Less than 5, probably. There was one other ship that we knew of going to the North Pole that summer from Germany. Russia definitely has icebreakers that some of them go even on tourist trips to raise some cash, just like you can buy a seat up to the space station. It's cheaper to go on an icebreaker to the North Pole, but it's not, there's no like cruise ships doing it yet or commercial ships to the pole. There's some that hug the coastline and go around now, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, it's getting thin, and I didn't even see those. Someone else saw them, and I verified it and duly reported it to science, right? Well, we made it, and we made it, as you can see, a week early, even more than a week early. We made it like almost straight shot with very little difficulty or detour. So good news is, yay, we made it. Bittersweet, like it should have been harder than this. We always heard like never count on it because you can get stuck. Things can break, people can get sick. But we just rock and rolled right up to the North Pole. Arrived on the 5th. It doesn't look any different, all right? And it probably logically shouldn't, but it just looks like more ice. But we had open leads almost the whole way up. And it wasn't a random sampling because they're looking for open leads because it's easier to go. You can save fuel, you can travel faster. Even if you're not in the lead, if it's over there, there's room for the ice to just shift over and do it. But we definitely saw open water right up to the pole. Well, there's the moment, at least that antenna was directly over the pole. There's several systems, and the ship is long enough that they're slightly different from each other. The longitude is just bonkers because it's meaningless. Every longitude line meets at the North Pole, so the longitude is jumping around impossibly. Now, this is the Coast Guard. It's a military dry ship, so it's not pop the champagne. This is what.
US surface vessel to do so. Thank you for your initiative, cooperation, which led to this historic event. Have a good morning.
So pretty cut and dried announcement from the captain. But people were psyched. I mean, some of the science team did a run around the decks because then it's the time zone there, whatever. Yeah, yeah. So there we were. It was snowing a little bit, cloudy like it often is. And there we were. We spent 2.5 days there. It was the first time a ship had done what we were doing with the deep water sampling and measurements. So, and as you maybe couldn't hear, it was also the first time a US surface vessel made it unaccompanied. The 2 prior times Healy went was with another icebreaker so they could help each other. But we went alone, no helicopter support, just steam ahead, and we did it. The second day, the sun came out, which was great, and we stopped to do water sampling in this little open lead, which is great. So I put my time lapse out just to show, and my kids love this because I ask them, what do you think the sun does? And they have great predictions, but that's what it does. It just does a horizontal lap around in 24 hours. Technically, it's setting, but it still has almost 3 weeks to finish setting. And then it won't be up for another 6 months before it rises again. But it really is crazy to just, nowadays you just look at your GPS, but how did those early folks know they were at the pole? Compass doesn't work because it's haywire. The sun is never any higher or lower. You don't ever get to see stars because it's daylight. So it involves a lot of time. What time is it and how high is the sun, and having a clock that's good enough to track it. Plus you got to see it, which doesn't always happen because it's cloudy day after day after day. But that was actually one of the big problems, just figuring out where you were up there without the normal tools we can use at lower latitudes. Coast Guard had a really nice ceremony. A lot of people got their medal for this or that there. And then the crew got something they really loved, which is Ice Liberty. Because we had no ports of call. We hadn't seen land since we left Russia, and really no time off. So they said, a couple hours, you got to stay within this perimeter because they know the ice is safe, and they have actually polar bear guards they don't want to shoot a polar bear, but they got guards with shotguns. They have someone up on the bridge with a rifle, and had, special events like polar football and special guest appearances at the North Pole. And what was, I thought, really touching, a lot of the crew that had younger kids had them write letters that they would hand deliver and right at the pole. So that was pretty neat. We got our whole crew picture. There's the pole they brought. But there's the polar bear guard still watching in there. And if the horn blows, everyone just go up the ramp. They drop it. If you got $10,000 gear there, it's all right. Let the polar bear do what it wants. They really, the very last resort. And they've never had to shoot a polar bear. But, if you're going to be a picture like this, that's the best outfit to wear, I think. There I am. That's not me. I'm in orange, so I did a pretty good job. But the yellow jumpsuit won the day, I think. But here's what we're there for. At about 1:30 a.m., Ice Liberty was over. Bam, you go out and you start the next science station. And ice stations were really important because they couldn't start them as early as they wanted to because the ice wasn't thick enough. But by now, we had done a few, and again, not just the water sampling, but ice sampling, snow sampling, atmospheric particle sampling, meltwater sampling. I mean, if you could get it, we got it to study how these trace elements and isotopes move around and what they tell people. We had actually 11 principal investigators on this cruise. So a lot of big chiefs, grad students. Most of them were also carrying out experiments for colleagues who couldn't go on the cruise. So they weren't just doing their work, they were getting samples. The scale of it was really amazing. I could have written my journal every day on a different scientific aspect and not run out. And a lot of what I did was that. But also the life and the wildlife were big topics. But people are just working. And it was kind of a gradient. The most sensitive stuff was the farthest away and the farthest upwind. And then behind the ship where it didn't matter was something called beryllium-7. There's no way to contaminate. There's no source of beryllium-7 other than cosmic ray produced in our atmosphere. So you can't really contaminate that. But everyone had their role. They did it. We had helpers. I would go help with whatever I could. Stop long enough for the North Pole selfie there. And then, yeah. Right when we were about to leave, the German icebreaker Polarstern arrived. And we knew they were coming, but you just can't tell if we'll meet or not. But we did right when we were about to go. They had a helicopter. That's how they got that neat picture. And so the captains consulted, and even though we were on a tight time frame, they agreed, well, we can have like 4 hours. So we got to walk over about 1 kilometer of ice and visit the Polarstern, and they got to walk over and visit us. And it was really great. I mean, it was so cool just meeting other people from around the world at the North Pole. And then we left, and then they did about the same thing we did to compare. So one of the tenets of the program is these overlap stations where one ship doing one cruise line overlaps another ship doing another. Hopefully the numbers are pretty comparable so they can validate their data. And so they did a station there as well before they went off. They came up from Svalbard, which is the Norway side. We came up the way we did. Boy, did I try. I so wanted a bird at the pole. And I was always looking when I was working, or always, but I actually did 4, like, time off, look, and I didn't find any. But it's effort. I entered those checklists, 0 species each time at the North Pole. So that's an eBird. But yeah, I loved every minute of trying. It was just exciting, the chance of seeing something at the pole other than that. We saw stuff. I won't read this whole thing, but Jim Swift was one of the senior scientists. It was his 3rd trip. In fact, I think there were only 4 people who'd ever been to the pole at all. He'd been on both of the previous Healy trips, and the gist of this is each time they hit thick ice that stopped them, multi-100-mile detours. They had helicopter scouting. They had 2 ships to help each other. This time it was just us just going, boom, boom, boom. So it's anecdotal. It's not hard data, which they're getting more and more of, but just his personal experience was a lot thinner, a lot softer ice. Less of the thick multi-year ice that's very hard, more of the ice just from the previous winter. So it felt really different to him. Within 1 nautical mile was this open water. So that's a mile from the pole. That's where we went to sample our water. And there was a seal in it. It's a bearded seal, so there's stuff up there, and probably will be more. So at least, hopefully in the near future, back to your question a while ago, if there's seals moving north, bears can move north. The conventional wisdom is there's no polar bears at the North Pole because there's nothing for them to eat. But we saw tracks at 88, so pretty close. I would have no doubt there could be a bear there because now there's seals there. So off we went, working our way back down, and just about a day and a half after leaving, I got a page, seeing a bird. I was actually in a science conference, but I just got up and left, and they knew exactly where I was leaving. So amazingly enough, when I got out there, and this is the bird, just below 88 degrees north, and it's a northern fulmar, those same birds we had seen lots of in the Bering Sea. It's working really hard because there's no waves to get a dynamic lift off of, but it was working that open water. I don't know if it was a goner or if it was fine. I have no idea. But it was a welcome sight. I hope the bird's okay, but selfishly it was pretty fun to see that after a couple weeks of no birds. So I didn't really know where it would fit in the whole context of sightings, but when I got back, I dutifully e-birded it. Now, this is not a polar projection, so towards the pole, everything's way off kilter. But still, northern fulmars are usually pretty coastal birds in the Canadian archipelago, Greenland, Iceland, north slope of Alaska. This thing is way beyond any other northern fulmar that's in eBird. And I'll be the first to admit there's not a lot of eBirders up there. As of the research I did, this was the northernmost bird of any kind in the eBird database. And that database now is at about 500 million birds and growing quickly. So that kind of felt good to put that pin on that map. In the context of this, if you ever want to do a little project, like find out, you can do a data request and what you want and what you're going to use it for. eBird will send you a comma delineated file. You can just dump into Excel and look at it. So I just said, what do you have in eBird that's like above 80 degrees or above 78? And Greenland has some birds that are getting close. They're in northernmost Greenland, 79 degrees. There's some pretty northerly birds in these Russian Arctic islands, Franz Josef Land. I'm sure it's something else in Russian, but those are just above 80. There certainly are other Arctic Ocean birds, and the region there is high seas. It's not really, it's international water. But most of these are from the cruise I did in 2010. So that was my previous record of about 81.5 degrees. It was a black-legged kittiwake. But really, if you want to see lots of northerly birds, Svalbard's one of the best places. That's the Norwegian Arctic archipelago. And the list goes on and on and on. There's 755 records above 80 degrees. And a pretty good diversity. Some things that you think of as northerly, but not really super Arctic, like a puffin or Oh, guillemot. That's probably a lost bird way up there. Dovekey shouldn't be up there, but you know, birds do things they're not supposed to do. The farthest north, though, that to still have land is up in the Canadian Arctic Nunavut, and you can see stuff up at around 83 degrees on this tip of Ward Hunt Island, which I think is right on the tip of, is it Ellesmere Island, that really long northerly island up there. So it's just, I thought it was neat to get that from eBird and have their support for my research, and that's one of the things you put in, you get back. And it might just be your yard list or your county list, but it can be a pretty heavy-duty research if you want to do it. So the rest of the ice, again, was pretty birdless. In fact, totally birdless for another couple weeks. Amazing scenery. It was the thickest ice of the trip that we had purposefully saved for the end. We still made it without much delay. There were a few pressure ridges that stopped us. Then we'd back and ram, sometimes just one or two times. I think the thickest one maybe took 7 or 8 backing and rammings, and then we were through it. Here. Yeah, worst case, you finally give up and you go somewhere else. But one other design of an icebreaker is to be able to back up through the ice. So the rudders are designed so it don't break off. The propellers are designed so if ice starts getting in them, that they hopefully will work, and they did. But yeah, you've got a trail of broken ice, so by backing up, you can get a little more speed for the next try. And often they try a quick one, because sometimes it works. And then if it doesn't work, then they'll usually back up farther than the time before. They can really get a run at it and go. But if it's really too bad, then the other ship could try to do one of these around, so there's room for that ice to move over. And then if it's too thick, they just back up and try something else. In the worst case, they carry incredible amount of provisions. I mean, you could spend the whole winter if you had to. I don't think it's ever happened with a US icebreaker, but clearly the freshies run out, the salad greens and the tomatoes. But they have huge freezers, a lot of dried food and canned food. So if you got stuck, let's say, for a few weeks, you just hang out, and the winds are moving the ice. So the most likely thing is the ice itself to free you. But we never even came close to that. Oh, what's next here? Oh, yeah, this one is the one I did with that pole. So I had my GoPro. I obviously didn't have any dive equipment or whatever, but I clamped my GoPro onto a 20-foot-long aluminum pole. This hole was drilled to pump water to filter out to look for this beryllium isotope, but you'll notice a greenish tinge. So there's life there. That's plankton. That's phytoplankton. And then the ropey stuff is not a rope. That's a type of diatom, which is another photosynthetic organism, single-celled, but it links into these ropey colonies. So if there's stuff like that, then there could be zooplankton, and then there could be little things eating that, and so on. And kind of the lesson for like my students is it looks lifeless and dead and harsh above, because it kind of is, but underneath, it's pretty protected from the bad weather. It never freezes once you're below the ice. It's a whole nother world that's just, in some cases, a few meters below. So we're about 6 feet of ice here. And the problem with the GoPro is you can't see what you're filming, so I just would change the angle and put it down and look again and bring it back up and switch the battery and try another angle. I just did a bunch of this to see what I would get. There's my little tether you can see, so if it fell off, hopefully it wouldn't fall 2.5 miles to the seafloor. Never to be seen again. But that's what it's like looking up some of those ropey diatoms. This time, though, I changed it to look straight down. And I got another really cool surprise. Couldn't tell this was there because of the slush, but there's a fish in there. And this is a little Arctic cod. So most cod are bottom-feeding fish. Arctic cod are like that, but they flipped it. They feed under the ice. So it's still like a benthic world, but it's just all inverted. The bottom is the top, because there's a lot of little things they can feed on. That's the main thing that seals eat. And then polar bears eat those. So again, it's this whole web. This is what it looks like to look down in 2.5 miles of water. It's just black, endless But when it was done and we were packing up, I dropped my GoPro down a 40-foot line with a ring bolt at the end. The ring bolt to weight it and to stop the GoPro. So it's sliding down. You can see the ropey diatoms. This is the shadow of our warming tent that we haven't packed up yet. But the idea was just to push play or record, and then pack up, clean up, get ready to go, and then the very last thing, reel it back up and go back on board. And then go back and look through 40 minutes of mostly nothing. But sometimes you get lucky. So I don't think it's totally luck, by the way. That's a ring seal, and I'm sure it was checking us out. Like, what is this thing? What's this noise? There's a chance it's totally random, but I really doubt it. I think just like anything, what is this in my world? And in the water, they're really comfortable. They don't have any predators. On the ice, bears, but down there's nothing that really bothers them. So I think they were just checking it out, and almost fell out of my chair when because it was, of course, way towards the end when I was kind of getting sleepy and bored of looking at lots of ice. And I can't believe that happened. So you never know. Can't get it if you don't try, right? So back we went. We hit some more birds coming into the open water, another wagtail. We hit these northern gulls that are glaucous gulls. And this is just a pinpoint going by fast, zooming in. It's a dovekie, this tiny little auklet type of bird. That's where that dovekie was compared to other dovekie sightings. Not too far away from that other North Slope sighting, but it picked up. It wasn't great. Ross's gull, that's a really choice bird, but we didn't see it well. We saw a few out there, though, and those are pretty cool. And by now, it's getting late. We're needing to get back. The weather's getting worse. Quite honestly, we started breaking stuff because they tried to do more stations in the big waves, and stuff was not holding up. So someone decided to draw that cartoon. Yeah, it looks good. Let's do a cast. And so anyway, we were pointing back, and as we did, a couple things changed. It was late enough in the season combined with getting far enough south that we got night again. Not long night, but it would get dark. And, what do you hope for up there when it's dark? Yeah, the aurora. So the other problem was it was cloudy so much. But a few nights it got clear, or at least clearish. But it was really tricky because the ship is still moving and it's windy. But the clouds are starting to glow green, and then the aurora itself. And we had a few nights of just off the hook, horizon to horizon, dancing ribbons. This is time lapse, so of course everything here is sped up, but it was something else. The time lapse was just push and go, walk away from it. But to do the photography, it was really tough because you need long exposure, but it's shaky because it's windy and the ship is moving. So it was just a lot of trial and error, and like I talked about in my workshop, take a lot, keep the best. But here's one that's pretty nice ribbon looking up at the bridge of the aurora. We started picking up some more visitors. This is a little golden crown kinglet, just like you'd see walking around here. And that bird was kind of off track too, up in the Chukchi there, away from the other sightings. When we got into the Bering Strait, there were a little pod of orca. And these guys are very strategic because there's whales that go up too, gray whales especially, that are going to migrate all the way down to Baja. And so they're lying in wait, especially for young whales. So I know it's not a very good orca picture. There's a tip of one there and another dorsal fin. But the birding got really crazy for a little bit because same reason, all these Arctic birds spread out are collecting up and funneling through the Bering Strait that's only a few miles wide. So heading through the Bering Strait, it was windy. 16 knots, it's snowing. But other than that, it was really great. Great conditions for lots of birds. So these are short-tailed shearwaters that were up in the Arctic, and they're heading towards New Zealand to nest. They spend their winter in the Arctic summer. They're all collecting up. These are murres, probably mostly thick-billed, but too far away to tell for sure. They're heading south, because all this will be solid ice soon. Some more short-tailed shearwaters. So they do this thing called dynamic soaring where they pick up the wind and then glide it out, pick it up, glide it out. They love it windy. If it's calm, they land and just wait for the wind because they don't want to fly too much. They want to use the wind as much as possible. That's a Pomeranian Jaeger, so that's like a pirate out looking to get some food from another bird. They don't catch their own food, at least very rarely. That's a eider, either a king or a common, I can't tell. It's just a brown eider. This is a white-winged scoter, which would be really hard to tell, but when it turns, you get these big white flashes in its wing. And if you take video, you can stop it and look frame by frame to help you figure these things out. Just so cool to watch those. Some of the flocks of these were in the hundreds. It was kind of continuous, but there'd be groups of more, groups that were less. Working our way back. So after a few hours of that, I think this is what I look like. Not to mention it was like almost 9 months, 9 weeks into the cruise. There's a pine siskin that just landed right behind the bridge. Again, just unebered to kind of see where they are. It's not terribly ridiculous to think they cross over from time to time. I have been very seasick. So if I go on a pelagic, I get that scopolamine patch by prescription. I just found it works for me. Good news is when you're in the ice, there's no rolling at all. And even in that stuff, that ship is really pretty stable. So no, I kind of did just a in case bonine pill, but I didn't take another one and I felt fine. So yeah, it was pretty smooth ride. But there's just signs of getting farther south. You lose the glaucous gulls and you pick up the glaucous winged gulls, which are more dusky looking like that. We picked up a few more albatross. Here's a late Laysan albatross again. And we saw black-footed as well. And then you really know you're getting close to home when you see the cormorants, because they don't go incredibly far out. These are pelagic cormorants. And not too long after that, we started to actually see the islands. So not like the trip north, partly because we're going a lot faster, partly because it's later in the year, but picked up some more nice birds, Bering Sea, even more. And then we're homebound. So I know time-wise, we're probably about homebound here too, but we got back to Dutch Harbor a day early. Just, again, everything was going smoothly. This is our track. So we did roughly 5,000 nautical miles through the strait up to the pole in the eastern hemisphere, back down in the western hemisphere. One little detour, a crew member, I don't know, the details, was a bit ill, and they felt more comfortable getting them back to shore, so they got close enough where a helicopter could come out from Point Barrow and pick them up. And then we just mainlined it back. Most of you know this because you're a very educated crowd, but Alaska itself would stretch from California to the coast of South Carolina if you have all the Aleutian Islands and then the southerly part. It's a big place. And we kind of did that plus double that and triple it and quadruple it, roughly speaking. So it's kind of like coast to coast, coast to coast trip. Dutch Harbor, Priest Rock, toss the mooring line, and baboon. Now, a lot of you maybe have been in the military or had family or whatever. The crew was very excited about going on shore, finally. But this was Sunday night at about 10 o'clock, and everything closes. So everyone had to wait one more night before they could finally go and do stuff. And for me, that meant one more day of birding. We were there a day ahead of time. My flight wasn't until the next day. So I was like, see you, suckers. And I have my little Fitbit. I set my daily record for my Fitbit of all time because just walked everywhere all day. And there's these really gigantic hulking Pacific wrens that are endemic. They don't migrate. There's harlequin ducks everywhere. It's like mallards around here. It's like the trash duck. There's no trash birds. I get that. But they're everywhere. It's so amazing. Not when we left because they're up in the streams, but now they've dropped down into the harbor. There's this gigantic dark song sparrow subspecies. There's red-faced cormorants that just swim right up to you and, hello. Doesn't have its red face because it's past that season, but pretty neat. So I think it's the last one, if you'll bear with me, but you'll kind of appreciate this just because there's so much diversity. And just being on land after 9 weeks at sea, it was pretty neat, I got to say. And I don't know how these old sailors used to do it for even longer period of times on even smaller ships with even less, amenities. But I went crazy. I was just like a kid in a candy store. I mean, how can you not love that? Harlequin ducks. Sea otters. These are stellar sea lions, a little northerly version, very similar to California sea lions, but the northern flavor. They just had a little place where they were hanging out, doing their thing. They're curious. When they saw me, they all periscoped up and looked, and then they just went back to their business. There was still a silver salmon run going on through town. There's a little stream. I don't think they're native there, but once you stock them, they'll come back with really good fidelity. And they don't allow fishing in through town. So it's just birds and fish and gulls and eagles so fat they can hardly fly. They don't even eat the whole fish. They just peel off the skin that they like or whatever and leave the rest of it. Mostly glaucous winged gulls, and there's just bald eagles everywhere. Most of the humpbacks had cleared out, but there were a couple at least that still hadn't. I think most of these go to Hawaii for the winter. Anyway, the trip was great, but this was soul refreshing to just be out and about and not confined to a 420-foot long ship. So it was a nice little wrap-up of some more birds that probably wouldn't have seen if everything was on schedule and I just had to go straight to the airport. Well, I appreciate you listening. I hope I didn't go too long and tax your patience. I'm happy to address questions either as a group or just afterwards. Come on up and chat. But yes, sir. There, yeah. And I'm not in on all the scientific journals, but yeah, absolutely. And the publications are just kind of starting now because there's a while to analyze it, write it, get it reviewed. But I think it's going to roll now for several years from this cruise. And GEO-TRACES as a whole still has several more years to finish the Pacific, to finish the Southern Ocean. Every ocean basin has countries involved measuring those as well. So I think yes on a short scale from the Arctic cruise, and then yes for a long time more as the whole global picture comes together, how ocean water is circulating, how it's changing. Hopefully repeat in another 10 years or so, because that's another big part of this is to see, because we repeated stations from 10 years ago, do it again, to see over time that change too. So absolutely, yeah. Yes? Well, so I would love to. I definitely would not want to do it every year. It's just really hard to be gone from life that long and school. Technically, PolarTREC is supposed to be a one-time opportunity. I got lucky because when this opportunity came along, they needed someone who had already been on an icebreaker without recruiting and training. So they asked a few of us if we were interested, and I said, yeah, and I made it through to the final interview and got picked. But there's other cool things for teachers. And not just science. There's a lot of travel opportunity for cultural reasons, for science reasons, for art. The National Geographic trip I took was mostly just to be an ambassador of nature and climate and education and geographic literacy, so that was a really cool trip as well. So yeah, I'd love to look for another opportunity. Probably not quite yet, though. Give it another few years so my wife doesn't get too mad at me for disappearing. Yes? Well, that's a really good question. I mean, at first, I think people who don't really know them, I think, well, what's this? They've heard of bird watchers, or they think of, you know, what's the Beverly Hillbillies? What was Jane? She was their hat and their. What I see a lot, especially with young birders, they may be in a school where they're the only young birder, a 15-year-old, they don't have any young friends, and they get to birding camp, and all of a sudden they see all these other people their age who love birds. And some of these scientists kind of knew about birds, but they didn't realize like what kind of diversity there can be. And the crew, like I said, when I gave the talk, we invited crew, and the helicopter hangar had like 80 people in it. It was amazing that they were really interested in seeing, because they're up there all the time. Well, what is this? How do these birds live? And so I don't think it was prejudice. I think it was a little cautious, like, is this guy crazy when he says, you know, can I really page him at 4 a.m. if I see a bird? Like, yeah, page him at 4 a.m. And I'll show up. And I did. And I'd always explain to people if I was out on deck, they'd ask. So I think there's a curiosity. Maybe it's just because at 9 weeks at sea, you're bored and anything is exciting. But yeah, I thought it was really welcome that aspect. I think if I did that instead of what I was supposed to do, then it would have been problems. But you get it, you do your job, then you're fine to do this other thing. Or if it's really amazing, like that bird, they knew why I left that meeting and why I came back afterwards, and they all shared in my celebration. So yeah, I think it was a very welcoming environment. Right. Yeah.
What kind of scientific research has been done using the eBird database?
I just went to a conference this spring where one of the eBird managers began to explain that. And as their database grows, more and more land managers can use it. Conservation organizations. I'm talking really broadly here. I know eBird itself has a page of an ever-growing examples of that, because they also have to show results to get their funding. But everyone knows that not every bird is correct, or some checklists are off, but just the volume of it, if you want to see big patterns, it's working. They're getting some neat things with supercomputer times to show these migration maps, how birds move. And so I think more and more researchers are starting to realize that it's valuable. There's still value in having professional ornithologists or trained monitors do the very specific protocols, but just birders going out and putting in their data, I think more and more professionals can go and use it. But I'm being general here, but I know eBird has addressed that. They have like an article that online, so they add to it as it goes.
What kind of camera equipment did you have?
Almost entirely, if you didn't go, I talked about a bridge camera, an all-in-one super zoom. It was a Leica Velux Type 114. Leica generously let me take it. And a GoPro. And then a Brino time-lapse. And you can do time-lapse with a GoPro or with but then you have to dedicate it. So this, all it does is time-lapse. You can set it to go and go. And it has some neat modes, like night mode for the stars or for the aurora. So I love that, too, for when I wanted to do a time-lapse but not give up my other cameras for 6 hours to do it. Yeah. Sweet.
How did you know the polar bear was
So I didn't know specifically, but with everyone seeing it in the photos, they email, there's polar bear researchers too. They know who's going. They say, hey, we'd love to know your sightings, where it was, if you get pictures. So they got back to the chief scientist and relayed that message along, partly just because she was so belly heavy. And again, I'm not sure if I could tell, but they can tell by looking based on the neck profile. That the males, I guess it's more of this, they can put the collar off. The female is more of a neck with, once you put their collar on it, it'll actually stay and you can track them. So someone with a lot of polar bear knowledge passed that along to us. Oh, fantastic. Well, again, thanks everybody. I hope you have great trips tomorrow, wherever you are off to, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.